I'm about to tell you something that's probably going to make you feel sad and disappointed. If you were thinking about buying tickets for the Brazilian Grand Prix, chances are there are probably none left now. And I did not expect my last video to both age like milk and fine wine. Ugh, milky wine. Ugh. Before yesterday, I was going to give my take on the now traditional Ferrari presentation of themselves to start things off, because, you know, Italian preview and predictions. But that can hold its prancing horses for a second, because this this requires more than just your standard fun of doubt. Because, by the power of hot takes, I have a podium! Because Franco Colapinto has gone from being an FP1 fixture for Williams, standard fare, to now being Logan Sargeant's replacement for the rest of the year, overcoming the likes of Mick Schumacher, Liam Lawson, and even Frederick Vesti. He got the cold shoulder as well. Now that would have been a twist in of itself had Fred got the job. Now for those of you wondering whether or not Franco has enough super license points to actually do the job, he does, but when I did the mathematics, he just about scraped through thanks to that FP1 session at Silverstone. But all three of those men that I just mentioned, they have vastly more experience than Franco does, and that just initially makes me think, what on earth is James dating right now? Does James want to simultaneously put tons of pressure on Colapinto and then not put tons of pressure because there's no real end goal of a drive for next year? Now let me preface this by saying that I am happy for Franco as an individual specifically, and reportedly he was able to call upon the power of Argentina to be able to try and help fund his campaign in Formula 2 because the Williams Academy, they obviously weren't paying enough for a full season, and he was able to live out a dream. Whether or not he can actually sustain it for 2025 remains to be seen, but right now, it's actually reached its end goal of getting to Formula 1. The first Argentinian driver to drive in the sport since the likes of Gaston Mazzacane. And if he scores a point, the first since Carlos Reutemann back in 1982. That part of the story is noble, and I hope he has fun, since he doesn't have to worry about blowing his chances for a seat at Williams for 2025, because yeah, you ain't getting one. And also, what really fills me with this amount of doubt is the fact that Franco won't be able to do free practice 1 sessions anymore after this. Once you've done more than 2 Grand Prix starts, that's your lot. That's something that Liam Lawson is having to face with. And most likely, Franco's just going to end up being the Williams reserve driver, not really doing all that much. Because sure, I was wondering about whether he could go back to Formula 2, and technically he could, because he's not won the championship. But the question is though, will there be a space for him for next year? Because there's going to be a huge contingent of Formula 3 drivers coming through, including the other Williams Academy driver in F3, Luke Browning. Needless to say, this is a bizarre choice for Williams to make if Val's reasoning is to do with scoring points, because the last time he used that logic was to give Alex Logan's chassis for Australia, and look how that turned out. I really do feel bad for Logan, because he probably knew that he was out of a job when he started the Dutch Grand Prix, and when he finished, that's his lot in terms of a Formula 1 car. And that was pretty much summed up when I saw a fan video of him signing a fan's cap, and then the fan got an extra surprise. He got Logan's actual Williams race cap. Logan? Oh, that guy had checked out. Now this bit, I can start to put the doubt down a little bit, and it all remains from the fact that we are now starting to see, you know, a bit of South American representation, and hopefully my doubt will fall down just like that. It just feels right to have somebody from South America in Formula 1, because it's all about being a global sport, and now all you need is a race and a driver from Africa and we're sorted. If he does okay and he brings the car home without great incident and he even scores a point or two, then okay, great. James's data will have actually dated in the way that it was meant to be dated. But if it turns out not to be the case, the Formula 1 world, the media, the journalists, us content creators, we're going to be watching Franco like a hawk. And the moment he has a crash akin to what Alex and Logan have done this year, yeah, everyone is going to hound him. And James will never hear the last of it. Because Franco was meant to be brought in to be a steadier pair of hands than Logan, to score points to validate the Williams Driver Academy without actually committing to a full-time driver. That way, James and Carlos can still have their way with each other in private, in that little hotel room of James's. And okay, I'm not saying that it's an absolute guarantor that Franco is going to crash the car. I'm sure that he won't. He will drive very carefully. There's no pressure for him to score points. He can just go out there and make the most of it because, hey, Williams ain't going to be hiring him anytime soon for a mainline role unless Alex Albon quits or Carlos quits, but I doubt that they will either because Williams might be on the up. But either way, Franco gets a chance that he probably wasn't going to be expecting, and now Argentina has got something to be happy about. there you go. They've waited 2 decades for a Formula 1 driver, and now they got one. And also, I'm pretty sure that Franco has had a hand in developing the FW46 in the simulator, so he's not a complete stranger to the car, and he was able to correlate all the stuff he learnt on the computer in the car itself at Silverstone. So, he's got a baseline, he knows what to expect, he didn't cause any harm to the car back then, so, okay, good start. And not to mention, he's probably a heck of a lot cheaper, a lot less complicated than those other replacements, and he potentially comes with sponsorship money from, supposedly, the Automobile Club of Argentina, Mercado Libre, an e-commerce firm, and Globant, an Argentinian IT company. So yeah, in a way, it's a win-win for James because it validates the driver academy, he gets a few $1 million to help make up for the repair bills that have befallen Williams this year. It's all good. It's absolutely fine. It's made up for all of that time and money and revenue lost. I really do wish Franco well, and for all of those Argentinian fans out there, I just wish that he gets that really represent your country and that he manages to do good. Back to Ferrari and what they're planning for Monza. They're going to be sporting a special livery like they have done in the last couple of years, as well as racing overalls. And the consensus at first when we first saw the designs was, oh no! The carbon fiber virus has got Carlos and Charles! Run for your lives! When you get rid of the carbon fiber jokes and take a step back from proceedings, you realise that, oh, okay, the message is a lot nicer. It's a tribute to the people at Maranello who craft all the carbon fiber parts of their car by hand. And what better way to pay tribute to them than at Monza, Ferrari's spiritual home? Okay, that's a nice idea. I can get behind that. Even though Shell and HP can't be, and they had to be the party poopers in this situation, not going along with the colour match. But hey, every party needs a pooper, that's why Ferrari invited them. As of now, the livery hasn't been revealed, but honestly, given the theme of this year's livery and basic design language of Ferrari, do you really expect much other than an all-carbon fibre Ferrari with some yellow stripes like they're meant to be with the yellow and white on the engine cover and stuff? It's not really going to be spectacular. Maybe there might be some more accents, and of course the HP blue ball is going to be absolutely staring us in the face because they're not going to be going along with the flow, nor will Shell. And also, the idea of an all-black car has just been completely tainted with the idea of weight saving and carbon fibre just taking away colour from the sport. And even though this is meant to be an intentional tribute and meant to be all black, it's just not quite the same as it was back in the day when the cars were painted black. The first time we copped eyes on the black Mercedes of 2020. That was amazing. Then, of course, the test liveries of Renault from 2019 and 2020, then the Arrows livery of 1998, and I could easily go on. There are plenty of examples of all black cars, which looks absolutely lovely. But the difference here, though, is that the experience is just not quite the same. But anyway, you know what? I like the message that Ferrari is trying to convey here, so I don't really care what they do, so long as it's not offensive, and I hope that HP plays ball with the colour scheme. And if they do, then okay, I'll just defer judgment. But they are nothing in comparison to the tribute of the Le Mans racing overalls from last year. The 2023 racing suits from Monza, gorgeous. Now this next thing is something quite groundbreaking, what I'm about to share with you. No, really, the ground was broken to make this a thing. Monza has been altered. The infamous Turn 1 that curses real drivers and sim racers alike is different. Not only that, but the entire track has been completely reprofiled. The track has been resurfaced, the curbs have been modified somewhat, so hey, Red Bull, Verstappen, be careful. And those changes that I mentioned at turns 1 and 2, they've been made to change the actual curvature somewhat of the chicane, as well as making it that little bit wider, so that means more cars can get through without ending up in the gravel like we saw in 2021. And not to mention, there's a little bit less astroturf over the bump in turn 1 and 2, so you can't really run as wide as you would like to if you don't want to avoid track limits. And you might be thinking, this is absolute sacrilege. Why on earth would they change the design of Monza? It's beautiful, it's elegant, it's infamous. Well, this isn't exactly the first time that Monza's chicanes have changed, especially turn 1, because before the mid-70s, there wasn't a chicane, it was all straight. But then they added the chicane in 1974, in fact a double chicane, and it was constantly tweaked here or there for the next 25 years or so. Then in the year 2000, they introduced the chicane that we know today. And really, you're not changing the profile of the track, you're just making the track a little bit wider for those chonkers of a car. And hey, it might make turn 1 a little bit less scary for all that race it, be it virtual or real life, especially the F3 title being decided here, and you've got 30 cars going into it. Seriously, if you've not watched Formula 3, especially at Monza, it's a sight to behold. It's mad. It's like a public lobby in there. Another byproduct of all this could be that the new tarmac will play havoc with Mercedes and cause them some problems. As we're all aware of these days, the W15 is a tricky beast to tame and needs all the practice sessions it can get to fine-tune. And also, let's not forget, it is an absolute terror when it comes to cooling. Sure, the issue isn't as major as it was in Bahrain, but at the same time, it is still something that is holding Mercedes back somewhat. Hopefully they'll be able to rectify it, but it's still a cause for concern because this kind of asphalt, brand new, this dark shade, it's going to send track temperatures above 50 degrees. And the weather for the weekend? Is there going to be any cloud cover? No! 34 degrees on Sunday. These cars are going to need all the cooling it can get, so I don't really expect Mercedes to do that well unless they've come up with an upgrade that can address the cooling issues. And I think it will only exacerbate the frustration that they had during the Dutch Grand Prix when they were suddenly losing pace after finding it prior to the summer break. But at the same time, I feel like Lewis Hamilton might be able to rise above it somewhat and maybe scrape into the top 5, simply because this is the first time that he'll be interacting with the Tifosi in their full force, not just at Imola, but at Monza, the spiritual home of Ferrari. It's going to be a sight to behold. And even though Kimi Antonelli is there to maybe take away some of the plaudits and the attention, the fact is though, this will be the first time that Tifosi will be seeing Lewis and not hate him, choosing to be alongside them for the last few years of his career. He'll want to make a statement when he joins Ferrari next year, and it'll be a tall order for the team to work with at this, the final European race of the season, but I do think that maybe something good will come out of it. As for the Scuderia themselves, they will be bringing upgrades reportedly to Monza. I mean, it makes sense, and considering that Zandvoort was a big surprise for even them, I wouldn't be surprised that they will be going into this weekend with a bit of a spring in their step, and a reason to feel confident. That they might be able to resume the battle that they had with Red Bull at the beginning of the year, and start to snap at their heels again. Okay, the prize that they are looking for is not first place in the Constructors anymore, that's basically McLaren's to lose. But I don't think Ferrari really care anymore, so long as they can actually beat Red Bull, even if it's for second place, then that's good enough for them. And also, Charles and his new race engineer have dialed it in with one another, and the home crowd still love him. And even Carlos might be able to gain from this, even though he's on the way out of the team. Because remember, if you've ever driven for Ferrari, and won with Ferrari especially, you'll hold a place in the Tifosi's heart forever. Now, of course, we have to limit our expectations somewhat, because we have been burnt quite a few times this year when it comes to Ferrari upgrades. In fact, you could easily say that Ferrari are the biggest victims of the development war that has actually manifested this year. They took a gamble, they rushed parts in, it didn't work, they lost months of development time, they had to start over, they lost their technical director. It's been a big challenge for the Scuderia this year, but they've been able to come up with something, and now Charles has been able to get back on the straight and narrow after a ghastly triple header. So yeah, I do feel like Charles might be able to do the business and maybe trouble the podium once again. And speaking of their battle with Red Bull, it's hard to say what's going on with them at the moment, but clearly they are scratching their heads to find the right configuration of parts to give Max and Checo for any particular race. Verstappen keeps saying that there's just something not quite right with the car, that they haven't really put their finger on it, and time is actually running out because maybe in the next 2, 3, 4 races, the teams are going to have to start making the call about whether or not they're going to be stopping development on this year's car and then moving to next year. And Red Bull might decide to just cut their losses for this year and try again in 2025 to try and really figure out what's going on and make the RB21 not suffer from the weaknesses that the RB20 has. They'll just consign that car to the dustbin of some of their memories and just pretend it never happened. And I will say this time and time again, sure, losing Adrian Newey was bad, and Jonathan Wheatley, him going, will be probably just as unfortunate. But them losing Rob Marshall last year, that was the beginning of their problems, because Rob Marshall, he was their head engineer since the beginning, and him going to McLaren probably explains a lot as to their sudden rise to the top. But yeah, Rob Marshall, he's probably just as critical as Adrian Newey in the engineering and mechanical side of things. Now, in terms of the other teams, it's hard to say. Haas might get some points if they have upgrades to bring after recovering from their PR nightmare thanks to their old fling coming back to haunt them. And their cars are quite slippery down straight, so that might help as well. But as for the other teams, it's really hard to say. Alpine, even though they did quite good at the Dutch Grand Prix, there's no telling whether that might actually transfer over to Monza. Williams might be in contention for points because the upgrade did look good. It did get Alex into Q3, and quite convincingly so actually, beating a Ferrari and a Mercedes, but we don't know the full extent of the upgrade, so Williams will try and gather as much data as they could from Zandvoort, and then bring it to Monza, and just see what they can do, because Williams is still tricky with downforce, and I just feel like we might see something from them, but it's hard to say right now. I really can't make a call. I think Haas is the most likely to score points, then Aston Martin. Williams might be a surprise though. But okay, let's head over to the top 5 predictions themselves. Now, you might be thinking that this is recency bias, and you might be thinking that, oh, you're just like all the other British journalists saying that Norris is going to win every single race from now on in. Well, I do feel like Lando is on cloud 9 at the moment, and if he can do it again here at the Italian Grand Prix, the place where he's able to get second place in the 2021 McLaren, arguably a car that could in theory have won races as well, I do feel like he could be in contention to win the Italian Grand Prix, albeit not as dominantly as at the Dutch Grand Prix, maybe by about 5 to 10 seconds or something like that from the second place man that I'll mention in a moment. But I really do get a suspicion that 22.9 seconds is going to become the F1 equivalent of the England-Germany 5-1 result that people in England will just not stop talking about, much like how Germany will not stop going on about them beating Brazil 7-1. I do feel like Norris has the confidence in which to lay this down again, because Max and Charles in the cool-down room after the Dutch Grand Prix, they looked lost and bewildered. They didn't expect McLaren to win by over 20 seconds, and they just had no clue as to how to respond. Even Max was not looking like his cool, confident self. And I really do think it's down to the fact that Lando finally has a car that can basically do whatever he wants. And even though it might be early to say that the MCL38 is consistently the fastest car, it's probably the best car. And of course, all of the headlines that Lando has generated over the years will come back to haunt him eventually. But for right now, I don't think he's going to care. I think he's going to just care about the fact that he wants to try and whittle down Max Verstappen's lead in the championship. And if he can do that by winning and Max coming second and getting a fastest lap, we might be game on. But right now, he just needs to keep doing it. Keep winning and keep getting fastest laps, then we can talk about championship titles. And hey, if he can have a good start at Monza as well and then go on to win, I think the spectre of bad starts and him bottling it will completely walk out the door. Then, much like with Lando, I feel like Charles will be motivated as well, which is why I put him in second place, because no one was really expecting Charles to be that composed and calm and basically holding back Oscar Piastri for multiple laps for the second time this year, the first time being around Monaco. And that was absolutely domineering of itself. It led him to win that home race of his. Because there was a genuine point that Ferrari were falling into the clutches of Aston Martin. They suddenly became the 4th fastest car suddenly, and at one point they were near the fastest near the beginning of the year. But now they are starting to redress the balance because the upgrades are coming back in. They've managed to figure things out, and they are going to probably use this year to try and get back on top of themselves, ready for 2025. When Lewis comes in, they can give him a car that he wants, and then Charles can maybe work with it, and then it'll all be hunky-dory. And I think this is a really good example of when Charles is in his element and he has the confidence, he has the motivation, he has the gusto. He can be mighty. He can be good. He is just very easy to knock off of his perch when the car is at the absolute limit. If you give him a car that has a little bit of wiggle room to maybe not go over the limit, Charles can be absolutely boisterous and cocky and just ballsy by keeping the McLaren, which was the fastest car at Zandvoort, behind him for so long, and really exacerbate the fact that Piastri is still weak in that department in just licking the stamp and sending it. Now, of course, this all hinges on the fact that he needs to do well in qualifying in which to do the job, because, yeah, you can overtake here at Monza. It's relatively easy compared to the Dutch Grand Prix, but I do think that the field spread will be very, very effective here. I do think that Charles needs to do a good job and get onto the top 2 rows in which to actually then maintain a podium finish. Then in third place, I've got Max Verstappen. And yes, the RB20 is not as good as it used to be for the fact that everyone else has caught up, and Red Bull have effectively been just treading water and going sideways almost. In some ways, they get better. In other ways, they get worse. Or the fact is, though, they just stagnate. But either way, Max is still able to do something with that car, and it's with a slower specification of car that Sergio Perez has. He was able to easily be the second fastest driver at Zandvoort, even though the car was falling away from him, and at some points it was the 3rd fastest car. He could still make it work and get on the podium without that much trouble of Charles Leclerc actually threatening him. He could actually dictate the pace, and according to Martin Brundle, he was even thinking that Max Verstappen was deliberately driving slower than he could have done to make a point to Red Bull that they need to do something about it. It was some sort of silent protest, because Max has been a little bit quieter on the radio. He's just choosing to use actions instead of words. And the language that he's speaking of right now has changed somewhat. Instead of being this angry, petulant rage that we saw in Austria and Hungary, it's now sort of more of an acceptance of damage limitation. That he needs to just try and do the best that he can, accept his lot, not try and outdrive the car and then maybe wear out pieces, because that's a very important thing to consider. We are heading into the flyaway races of the season. Parts are going to be harder to be able to ship if things break, and things are going to be wearing out. So the war of attrition will begin in earnest during the back end of the season, and I think Max is aware of that, so don't run the parts ragged, Max. Then I've got Oscar Piastri for 4th place, and it did work out at the Dutch Grand Prix. He did end up 4th, like I predicted, but I really can't see him do much higher, simply for the fact that he has still got some work to do in this department, because he needs to qualify higher than even Charles does. He needs to be on the front row to get the clean air, because Piastri is really susceptible to dirty air. He just doesn't have that confidence yet in able to make a pass behind a car and all the vortices that it's spewing out. By 2026, it may not matter so much. The downforce may not be an issue. But right now, it's probably just as bad as it was back in 2020. And Oscar, yeah, it pains me to say it, as him being my boy, it's sad to see him struggle, but he is struggling. But he is on an upward trajectory, because him saying that it was a terrible race and that he could have done better and he finished 4th is a lot better than what he was saying during the Spanish Grand Prix when he finished 7th and he was saying the same thing. So he is doing better, that he's expecting podiums now. Max is going to be driving out of his skin. Charles is going to be having an upgraded car and feeling better than ever and having effectively a home advantage. And Norris, well, he's absolutely euphoric after making a statement and response to Oscar's casual drop of his news about a broken rib. So, yeah, I do feel like it's all to play for in terms of Piastri and him whether or not getting into the top 3 of the championship, because right now, Charles has been able to actually pull away a little bit. And not to mention, I think Oscar will be quite frustrated with himself for the fact that he finished nearly 30 seconds behind Lando at that Grand Prix. So, yeah, he'll be wanting to redress the balance, but I don't think it's really coming at Monza. And then, like I touched upon earlier, I've got Lewis Hamilton in 5th position. It's going to be a little bit tricky whether or not he's going to be close to Oscar to fight and repeat all of the antics that he had last year at the Italian Grand Prix, but I do feel like he will be extra motivated to make a good impression with the Italian fans that will be supporting him and be right behind him next year, because otherwise it's going to make them feel a little bit concerned that he can't really do much, and yeah, that motivation will effectively be another home race of his. So I do feel like he'll do something, especially if he can qualify well and he can actually make do and actually have plenty of time to set up the car, that they can fix the issues that they had during the Dutch Grand Prix. Even though the cooling might be a bit of a problem, I certainly don't see him going for the win or the podium, but I do think top 5, that might be just about doable. I mean, I could be wrong, I could be right, I don't know, and I don't care. I just like doing these predictions, it's absolutely fine. But one thing is for sure though, he'll want to make a good impression and also try and just drill into the fact that Kimi Antonelli may be taking his place, but he hasn't actually replaced him yet, and also try and put George in his place as well after the last couple of races. And another thing that gave me a good impression was F1's official exhibition that is now based in London. I got to go to the presser for that before it opened to the public, and honestly, I'm glad I got to see it as press rather than as a VIP. So much more space. And if you'd like to see more of my enthusiastic excitement from going to that really spectacular opportunity, you can go and watch this video next, because tickets are available right now and you can go for yourself. But right now, oh, that was so fun. That was so fun.